Hello and good morning. Thursdays at 11 a.m. are QT Conversations. This is the Qualified Tutor members' opportunity to explore and push forward our thinking together. Today, we are focusing on how and why we build relationships with our students. We know that the relationship comes before anything else. We talk in our course and in my book, The Foundations of Effective Tutoring, that the three keys of effective tutoring are relationship, responsiveness, and reflectiveness. And we will come on to those other keys in other conversations, but today we're focusing on that first one of reflectiveness. You like my pink nails, don't you? I'm going to a wedding this afternoon. Oh, look at you. So we're going to be digging into relationship today. And I know that the people in this room are exceptional at building relationships with their tutors. And that's what I want to showcase to LinkedIn, on our podcast, and really push our thinking forward. I think it's also important to understand that each one of us has a different texture to the relationship that we develop with the students. And that's exactly as it should be, because as we know, tutoring is highly personalizable, highly individualized, not just to the needs of the student, but also to the needs and the approach of the tutor. So Jan plus student will be different to Jenna plus same student, because that relationship will have its own flavor. So we want to dig into I want to dig into what that relationship, what that flavor means for you. Sue, I know I told you I was going to start somewhere else, but I've changed my mind. So we're going to start with exploring what wonderful looks like in a relationship between you and your student. And I want it to be as specific as possible. Jan, we're going to start with you because at the last
Okay,
session
my
you
connection
mentioned
is really unstable.
what's
So,
unstable. Is it mine or yours?
can you hear me?
I can. Yes, we can.
It's
Okay.
mine. I keep getting
I'm
messages.
sorry.
Oh, right,
If you want,
okay.
if you pop out,
Can you repeat the
I
question?
will. Okay, so Sue, I'm actually going to go to Jan and I'll come to you after that. Okay, I'll give you a chance because you're
Yeah,
discombobulated.
yeah, I am.
um, so last week's session, Jan, you mentioned that you have this like really pleasant, positive relationship, particularly with your female students. So let's unpack what that looks and feels like and how you achieve it.
Yeah, okay. So basically I always try to build a friend-teacher relationship with my students. Like at the very beginning, once they joined my lessons, I would try to establish some common interest to find what we have in common, like both if we all like drawing, if we all like animes, etc. So I try to find the common interest we share with the students. And I feel like that's a very good starting point for them to build trust in you and then make them feel comfortable in the class. Because I believe the best learning experience should be you're feeling relaxed during the classroom rather than you're like kind of nervous when you're speaking, also you feel like being judged by teachers or students. So yeah, that's like the safe environment I try to build with my students at the very beginning, try to find the common ground we share. And also I would definitely use WeChat to support them off the class if they have any questions about their homework or whatever else. I try to help them, and not just about academic things. We sometimes also share our life. I said, for example, I went a trip. I will share some of my photos with my students, and then vice versa. When they did like a comedy show or whatever, they will also send me pictures of them in school doing a performance. So I feel like, yeah, in that way, we're really like sisters, friends, not just a teacher and a student.
Oh my gosh, that word sisters. Wow, goosebumps. Had you ever used that before?
What do you mean? Have I
Have
even
you
used a
ever
sister?
described the relationship as being sisterly?
Yeah, actually, the parents said my child treats you like a elder sister.
Isn't that gorgeous? And the way that you achieve that big sister relationship is through finding common interests and making them feel safe,
Yeah,
being the person that helps them and listen to
exactly.
them and share just enough of your real life.
Yeah, and I remember, well, back in when I was in China and Shanghai, I sometimes would also meet my students in person. Like I remember one of the students, she likes horse riding, and her family actually took me together to horse riding.
Oh, wow. They just brought you in.
Yeah, exactly.
Isn't that gorgeous? Sue, is your internet ready? You're on mute though. Hello.
Yeah, I'm all right if I sort of shrink everybody and I'm just using the audio rather than the video.
Fantastic. We'll happily be shrunk. Tell us about so Jan described her relationship with her students as a big sister. And I
Yeah,
assume that yours is not like that. Describe to us
no,
what that relationship is.
it's more like granny. Um,
Yep.
it's the person that they go to when they are cross with mum. No, there is an element of that, I think. They It depends because I do really huge range of ages. So my students are 6 to 17. Um, and the little ones, it is very much like granny, and they'll come and give me a little hug and stuff. Um, with the older ones, it reminds me more of when I used to be a youth worker. And over the months, I've realized more and more and more from these conversations that crossover between tutoring and coaching. So they will come and share issues about life or they'll go. I like what Jan was saying about sharing their life. There is an element to which almost all of them will come in and tell me what's going on, and they'll ask what's going on in my life. It is beyond that teaching role.
Yeah. And it's actually a really good signal of the quality of the relationship when they ask you what's going on in your life, isn't it?
Mm,
That
mm.
they feel involved and connected.
I
I
mean,
love
some
the,
of them.
I
Go
love
on.
the granny relationship. And I don't think it's to be underestimated. I don't know if you've seen Sugata Mitra's really brilliant TED talk, The School in the Clouds. So he invented this approach of helping school to reach any child anywhere. And the tutoring army that he proposed building was grannies. He said because grannies are just there to cheer you on. So his project was to build an army of grannies who are just those like yummy, supportive, I believe in you humans. So that's got its own flavor as well. But I think your youth worker insight becomes interesting as well. Um, and again, that's sort of mentoring, isn't it? And coaching.
Yes, it is. Increasingly, I'm realizing that you can't separate the two. In teaching, in the classroom, there's a strong element of it, but you don't have the opportunity to spend that amount of time with each child. I mean, when you think, if you're actually your face-to-face time is what, 22 and a half hours in primary.
And
If
how
you've
much
got a
of it is
class,
just spent handing out papers and sending people to the toilet?
yeah, and doing all the numerous tasks that everybody knows are totally pointless, but it'll make Ofsted happy.
Yeah, it's really depressing when you work out how much actual teaching time is in the day. It comes out as something like 1 hour, 45 minutes.
Hmm.
So let's go to Jenna next. It is remarkable how different the texture of your relationships will be to what we've just discussed. Go ahead.
I do think it's interesting though, because I also come from a youth work background, and it's kind of part of why I do what I do the way I do.
There's a song in that, Jenna.
Probably. I think that one of the things for me is I used to think that it was because of my age, because I started tutoring professionally when I was still at school myself, so I was occasionally even younger than some of my students, well, I say occasionally, for the first like 5 to 10 years, I was frequently younger than my students. But I never, it was rare that I felt it. And the only times that I felt particularly young was in my relationships with parents or younger students who were male or tended to be more frequently male, made a point about my age, inappropriately. But as I've gotten older, I was always worried that.
Jenna, I'm sorry to interrupt you because I really want to hear you. Your microphone is slightly crackly.
Is that any better if I move it closer?
No, let's have a go.
If it's still crackly, I can unplug it and plug it back in. It does happen.
It's crackly, isn't it?
Yeah. 1 sec.
Oh, sorry, I was really loath to interrupt you. Have a go.
Is it working?
Nicer.
Yeah? Okay.
Yeah.
If it becomes an issue, I don't know why. Windows, I really should switch over to using Linux for these calls because it keeps happening.
Okay.
But yeah, so I always thought that when I got older, my relationship and the way that I taught would change, and that I would be seen as, because it was kind of like a marketing thing for me sometimes, that, oh, you know, I can build that really close relationship with the young person because similar interests, because I'm a similar age. But actually, I find that now that relationship is more secure in that there's a little bit more balance. It's easier to keep boundaries, and there's just an extra level of respect and an extra level of almost trust. I still have a lot of issues with my age causing friction because I am still fairly young in terms of like comparative. So particularly in comparison to like the work that I've done, how long I've been doing what I'm doing, and how specialist I am, and people have issues with that. But I think it's a really interesting thing because like at QT, for example, we're such a range of backgrounds, such a range of ages and all sorts. And I find it really fascinating about how that affects our relationships with young people and how other people see our relationships. Like there's a whole stereotype of what a tutor is, and that's changing now, and that, I love seeing that. But there's this idea, like you see it perpetuated in media still all the time, and it often the media that I'm exposed to in particular that has this stereotype perpetuated is that kind of American coming of age kind of thing where it's peer tutoring, it's not tutoring. And peer tutoring absolutely has its place, and I was actually reading some really interesting research into it the other day. But I feel like that there's a lot of different aspects to what we do, and there's so many things that change that experience. And I think it's really interesting that Jan went and did horse riding with her student, because that's something that's really important to me, is doing those things. It doesn't matter how academic my work is, it doesn't matter how academic and traditionally academic the sessions are going to be, that personness is still there. The foundation of learning has to be collaborative, especially one-to-one. Like if you're stood there in front of a big group, there is no way to have that same level of interaction, especially if it's a big group, right?
But we all agree that you need to try.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And it's a very different way of getting to that, right?
Yeah.
And it's less like pressure.
I had a governor once who was so savvy. He taught me so much. And one of the things, we did a test lesson for a teacher who was trying out for a role. And he said to me, she's not a teacher, she's a presenter. I thought that was so insightful. You want to stand at the front and talk at people. That's not teaching and learning, you know? I want to share with you that in my book, that, as you know, is coming out in August, I look at the 4 archetypes of traditional tutoring models. And it's interesting to see how it maps against who we are here. So the first I talk about is the former teacher. And we know who we are in this room. We talk about the boy next door type. Yeah, and I think you come into that. We talk about the governess. And Jenna, you called yourself that last week. And interestingly, the 4th one is not represented in this room, and that's the diva, and that's the high stakes test prep tutors that make big promises and are in highly pressured environments. And it's not surprising that there aren't many of those who are QT members, because it's a different type of personality that lends itself to. But it's really interesting that you just hit on all those notes, Jenna, about what people think tutors and the tutoring relationship is like, and how we're exploding that. So Dee, will you tell us for a second, and I think in this room we have beginning to have a clear sense of what the relationship looks like between you and your students, but could you see if you can articulate it for us, please?
Yeah, I echo a lot of what's been said. I came to teaching late in life. I did my PGCE as I turned 40. I've also never raised a family, so I don't have that life experience of raising children, being exposed to what teenagers are going through in that respect. And when I got my teaching job, I didn't have a formal interview, and I think they were confident that I would succeed because of my previous experience as a presenter, that I had, media experience of, that kind of environment.
And you are remarkably articulate.
Yes, but in the classroom, I was a nervous wreck. And it was such an uncomfortable place for me to be for all sorts of reasons, that I had to walk away from it. It was the only sensible option for me. And I would love the opportunity to go back into a classroom environment and just see how differently I would feel, and what that experience would feel like. But my relationships with my students, echoing a lot of what's already been said, I am always keen to find a hook. What is it that I'm going to be able to connect with my students about? And this is often why I find it easier to connect with boys than I do with girls, because I'm sport and all that kind of stuff. But I've just come off a session with one of my longest serving tutees. We've been working together since January 2022. It's online. She's based in Dubai. She's a expat kind of background, very sporty. I mean, she does ridiculous amounts of sport, and she's just come back from the youth games in Gothenburg, where she was doing shot put, javelin, and discus. And we spent the first 10 minutes of our session with her updating me on that experience and the fact that she got two PBs in out of the 3 events. And she talked about some of the kind of the social aspects and what she learned. She also shared about how she's recognized that she needs a digital detox over the summer, because when she hasn't engaged with it, how much better she feels. And I was really loved. It was so good to hear that. And I engaged with her and, praised her for that self-awareness about how important that is. And then eventually we did some maths. But and she said,
what? This actually sounds a lot like the meeting I had with my GP yesterday. Do you know what I mean? Sometimes you just need somebody to hear that you're trying to be healthy.
Yeah. And she and the level of trust that is signaling is, fills me with as much joy as knowing that I am helping her on her academic journey. But from the thank you note that I got from her and her mum for World Tutors Day, the word mentor was mentioned in there as well. So I know that I'm hitting all the right areas, sometimes accidentally, sometimes intentionally. But as our relationship develops, it just brings me so much joy every day. I look forward to those sessions. Interestingly, a student I've been working with through the same tutoring business since September last year, again, it's online, expat family in Bermuda, I think it is. And it's been a real struggle to find the hook. And I started to kind of get there.
Male or female, the student?
Female. into Muay Thai boxing, so kind of did a bit of research, kind of making a way in. But it's still not happening for me, and I don't look forward to those sessions. And I have made the decision to tell the tutoring business that I am now not available to work after 6:30, which means I won't be able to work with her, because I don't want to work with this student anymore, because it's not filling my cup.
Yes. Is
It's
it
not
filling their
filling my,
cup?
I don't really know. The other thing that really bugs me is that we've been working together for an academic year, and I can count on the fingers of less than one hand the times that she has said thank you at the end of a session.
Yeah.
And it's almost been said accidentally when I've purposely said thank you for your attention, and it's kind of a reflex action. She's kind of said thank you back without really meaning it. And I don't look forward to those sessions. It's also late in the day on a Monday when I should be
it's such
okay
a
at the
funny
beginning of the
thing.
week, but
I've got living in a local community, there's often we sort of help each other out with rotas and stuff, bringing kids home from school. And there's one family, the mum is so lovely. She is such a great person, but her children are so fluming rude. And when they get out of my car, they never say thank you. 3 children, no thank yous every single time. Now, what really amazes me is in the whole drive home from school to their house, when I drop them off, of course, I drop them off first, I actually feel like I'm a visitor in my own car. Do you know what I mean? They have this energy that makes me feel like it's me that doesn't belong. And I find that so interesting that the relationship is totally off. What I need to do, of course, is invite them over to play in the garden, get to know them, and actually build relationship with them. Because even though I'm the adult and I'm driving and it's irrelevant, the whole, the relationship is irrelevant, it's not a nice atmosphere.
now I do need the money,
Yeah.
but I also need to be fulfilled and rewarded in my work, and it's not happening with that student.
There is a certain element of you've got the work. Is there a way for you to improve the relationship? And I want to come back to this in a second, right? So this student who rankles, you don't look forward to speaking to, you haven't found a bridge with her, she's not saying thank you. Does that mean that she's not enjoying it either? Let's park her and come back to her at the end of this conversation. Will that be all right? We'll do that as a project. Okay, awesome. I've got a few short questions for you first. Sue, I'm so glad you made it back. Okay, ready?
Speeds are still quite low, but a lot better.
Okay, awesome. My first question to you is, what do you refer to your students as? So Dee uses the phrase tutee.
Student.
Sue uses student. Jan, you also say student. Jenna? She's got a thinking face on.
It depends.
Go on.
I do use it. I use student and tutee interchangeably.
I usually say young person.
Yes. Really interesting. Young person is from the social work side of things, isn't it? So many of the alternative provision people that we speak with talk about the student as a young person.
Yeah, because they're not just the learner.
I think it's a really interesting question, because what I'm really asking you is, what role are you putting them in with your language? So I focus on student. That same governor that I mentioned to you before, the really wise one, he said to me once, take your eye off the teaching, put your eye on the learning. And it was foundational for me. So I'd go into a lesson observation and I would stop looking at the teacher and I would just watch the process that the children were going through. And for me, our language helps us to signal that. So if you'll excuse me, Dee, I think the phrase tutee goes with the role of presenter.
Okay.
I think it's a doing to approach. I'm doing education to you, right? And I think that when you talk about a student and or a learner, you're very much focusing on the academic progress. But as Jenna says, sometimes they're not ready for that. And so calling them a young person is actually a very neutral way of saying, I'm in the role of support. When you call somebody a young person, you are pretty much in the role of mentor, I would suggest. Go on, Jenna.
I have a question on the
I'm
same
just
vein.
riffing. I don't have any rights and wrongs here.
So, as well as asking how we refer to our students, I'd quite like to know how you refer to what you do. So, specifically, for example, I'm rewriting my entire copy at the moment, and I have been thinking about this way more deliberately than I ever have. I find myself avoiding really, really hard, like genuinely fighting using the word lesson. I hate using the word session because it's too youth workery for what I do and it is misleading. And I've had that become a recent issue. But I don't necessarily want to tell you what I've fallen on because I'd love to hear what you guys think first.
Come on then. Let's throw it out to the room. Jan, what do you call them?
You mean, how do I call my students?
No,
Just-
well, we've already said that you call them students.
Yeah.
What do you call your time with your students?
Oh, class or lesson.
Class. Interesting. And it's mostly groups?
I have both one-to-one and group classes. I would
Class.
usually say lesson or our class.
Lessons and class. Very, very useful. Sue?
I use session because it is a combination of learning and that youth workery, mentory type stuff.
I use session as well. Dee, what do you use?
Session.
Session. Jenna, what did you land on?
I interchange a little bit tutelage to describe the academic side of what I do, which goes hand in hand with tutorials.
Nice.
But
Tutorials
also
are interesting.
Studies for the academic side. The
What was
academic
that word?
mentoring
I missed it.
Studies.
Studies.
Occasionally they're referred to as study sessions.
Yes.
But I don't know for the mentoring sessions. I don't feel like sessions works quite so well, and I kind of want something that's a little bit more along the lines of tutelage because like, and I have a whole diagram going through the etymology of the word tutelage and why we chose it. But
Of course you have.
it's like Jenna's basically whittling out her ideal client based on how far through her content they get. Seriously though, what you just did, so for me there's also the concept of a program. Yeah, and when you sell your classes, do you sell them as a program?
I would break it into modules.
Interesting.
Yeah, because what I teach is not like a standard curriculum, but it's like each book is a module.
Nice.
Yeah.
Very nice. So then you're tying it to the content.
Exactly.
Very nice. And or to the learning objectives. Sue, do you have any sense of a program, a structure, an endpoint, a start point?
It depends on what I'm teaching. So with the 11 plus stuff, yes, I've written my own materials, and yes, we have an English module, a maths module, a non-verbal reasoning and a verbal reasoning module. And then it's a bit of a free-for-all once we've worked through those to plug any gaps. With the GCSE students, I'm sort of mirroring what they do in class, but I do have a degree to which, yeah, they have a program. We do a gap analysis at the very beginning, and we work through the things that they have identified as their gaps. And then at the end, we're going through
and then the little ones?
The little ones, no, they tend to be, because if you've got a 6-year-old that's had a really bad day at school, you're not going to be doing the same thing. We know that there is a general theme of phonics. There's very often, I work with some of the ELSA materials as well. But with the little ones, it is very much how are we today? What can we cope with? So they'll have, all of my students have got like a wallet. They have their own folders they take home, but they have a wallet that I keep. And with the little ones, I'll put in half a dozen activities so we can see what's suitable on the day.
So it's almost like there's something really tangible that creates the structure there. Jenna, something happened, something occurred to you there.
I'm intrigued. So for me, it's a bit of a weird one because I've gone down the route of registering part of what I do as an AP as an alternative provision.
Thank you.
Which is with the local authority and therefore has to match some of that. And it naturally follows one of the reasons for it. Thank you, darling. Sorry, I've just been handed a tea.
Can I have one?
Yes, please.
Oh, just top up my water bottle for me, please.
Oh, he's so sweet. He is limping around at the moment because he's got an injured foot, and he's still bringing me tea. Bless him.
Very kind.
But so part of what I do naturally follows that kind of structure, and I do think this week in particular, in reviewing what I do and the way that I do it, I'm seeing more and more where that youth work background is coming in. But we have a tiered system, so we have pathways. And then every child has a bespoke program that's designed for them. And then programs are made up of components, and the components are made up of modules, and the modules are made up of activities and projects and curriculum.
Them bones, them dry bones.
Exactly what's been going through my head this week. That one and the head bone is connected to the neck bone and all.
It's
of
the same one. That's the same one.
It's the same one.
That's the chorus. But I think there's also the lady who swallowed the fly in there somewhere. So meanwhile, I can see now how it's breaking down for you and how that language becomes really, really intentional. And it occurs to me then that you've got different tracks that signal different behaviors. The tutorial session is a different set of behaviors to a study session.
Absolutely.
Yeah, study sessions could be entirely quiet.
Oh yeah.
Tutorial sessions are likely to be a Socratic dialogue.
Yeah.
So that's already signaling to me what to expect from the session, which sort of shows how important our language is. I have another question related. What do your students call you?
As a title or naming kind of thing?
Naming.
I'm very uncomfortable with anything but my name or some variation of it, but I'm not strict. Just Jenna, Jen, any version.
They call you your first name.
For me, if you like, whatever level of informality they want.
Yeah. Sue?
So
D?
D, but there's a student in Dubai. I think they are Syrian background, and she always calls me Miss D.
I've seen that before as well. I'd love to hear from Jan when she comes back as well. Go on, Jenna.
So for me, it's whatever is most comfortable for the young person and for the family. That's a really good point. It really depends on the culture. I've had Miss, I've had my surname. I'm really uncomfortable with Miss because I don't identify as female and really struggle with that kind of titling. I've been called by job titles like tutor or teacher or, governess or whatever it is that I'm doing at that time or perceived to be doing at that time. With a lot of military stuff in my background, going by my surname is generally frequented as well. But I think
You've literally been called anything under the sun.
Yeah, aunt, uncle, all of that. Occasionally parental names, which is really, really funny. I love teasing students about that.
Oh, when your teacher calls you mummy by accident. Sue, I know that happened to you. It's definitely happened to me.
it's very sweet.
When one of my cadets did it, I think he wanted the floor to open up and swallow him.
Oh, it's brilliant. Yeah, I love it when they react like that as well, and you can see it, the realization. No one else particularly cares. The ones that though are the ones where they slip and call you something like babe or sweetie or like something like that. I love that.
I've not had that one.
Wow, I did not know that's where we were going today.
The nearest I've ever had is a student that insisted on calling me bruv.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
That's nice. As long as it's not fam, you're okay. So I taught in my teaching placement. I did one placement in a school in Fulham, a primary school in Fulham, where all the staff were called by their first name. And this was really, really new to me. And I found that certainly the teacher that I worked with was immensely authoritative. And it didn't matter that they called her Kirsty because they said it with such respect. And I learned that it doesn't matter what they call you, it's how they call you it. Right? So there's bruv and there's bruv. But I do think that's really interesting. One more question before we come back to Dee's project. If that's all right with you, we're going to finish on that, Dee. Is that all right? I want to ask you, how much chat is too much chat? So we know that it's important to check in with the students at the beginning. And we know that sometimes we have to jettison the learning plan to help them to get whatever it is on their minds, off their minds, so that they're available for learning. But we also know, certainly from the learning role, that sometimes you just want to scream to the other person, can we just get on with it, please? Yeah. Teachers, we love them, can be guilty of too much talking. I have sat in so many lesson observations where she's given the instructions 4 times and they were ready and raring after the first time. And by the 4th time, they've stopped listening, right? So, how do you make sure that your chat is measured in a way that is helpful to your session, conducive to your learning goals, and not just fluff?
Now, that is an interesting question. And I think through my coaching training, that is helping me with not question stacking, which is something you shouldn't do.
What does it mean, question stacking?
Question stacking means asking a question and then either asking the same, pretty much the same question, but in different words, because you're trying to amplify it because you think it needs it. Or you're asking a question and then you ask another different question, which is kind of going in the same direction, but is actually going to initiate different awareness in the client. So,
ooh, client. Hold on. We didn't put the word client in our list.
Well, that's when I'm coaching. That's when I'm coaching. Coaching your client when I'm coaching.
The people who pay you are your clients.
Yeah, the parents I refer to as parent or client. Yeah, when I'm coaching, because they're paying me directly, then it's client or coachee.
Just promise me you don't call the parent mum. Mum's really worried about such and such. It's so patronizing. People, when my kids are really in those difficult situations and they say, it looks like mum's really worried. I'm like, I am now because I have a name. So, sorry, Dee. Jen, I'm coming to you in a second. I interrupted Dee. So we spoke about question stacking.
Yeah. So when I'm starting the learning activity with a student, and very often the opening activity is something, and it's something they're used to getting, and I'll just say, take a look at that for a few minutes, and then when you're ready, give me your thoughts, and then I shut up because I'm also learning the value of silence. I'm waiting.
Let the pause do the heavy lifting.
The magic happens in the silence.
Beautiful. Absolutely beautiful. I think you said something really important there, that they're used to whatever it is you're putting in front of them.
There is routine. Not every student I do that with, but those that I can see respond well to that kind of structure, who know this is what they're going to have to do at the start of a lesson. And if I know that they're probably a little more anxious as well, if they arrive knowing exactly what's going to happen in those opening few minutes of a session, then it perhaps lowers, anxiety to a level where the learning is going to be more effective.
Yeah, I think that's true. I think also you want to get them engaged straight away, don't you? So, not asking them to sit on their hands and talk about their day for 10 minutes before they get involved in something is probably the right way around.
They always get asked what their highlight is of the previous week.
Oh, nice.
They always, that's always the opening gam. And I've got one student, again, I've been working with her for a couple of years now, and I'll say, I see her straight after school. So how was school today?
Fine.
And I'll get good. And I get a wry smile now because she knows what the follow-up question is going to be. Because
what was the highlight?
I won't let her get away with just good. Or
does she come with one prepared now?
No, but every time she says the word good or fine, she has this look on her face knowing, okay, come on.
Fantastic. Jenna, how much chat is too much chat? Or anything related?
So I find this one really interesting. But very quick before I answer it, the thing about referring to parents as mum said or mum or whatever, I find it really uncomfortable, and I've gotten to a point. So for background for anyone that doesn't know, I describe myself as neurospicy. I have all of the tisms, as my
I've yet
students
to meet someone who calls themselves neurobland round here, I have to say.
I love that. Hi, dog. Sorry, I'm being accosted by the puppy.
Mine's over here. Look at that.
Oh, I need.
She's all
That
legs.
is-
Yeah.
That
I
is
used
a
to have a
chilled
chair that
dog.
was big enough for her to curl up in my lap the entire day. But she hates that in this chair she cannot. So she just sticks her head in my crotch the entire day. Don't you? But I have gotten to the point with all of my communication. So I am very stereotypically autistic when it comes to certain types of social cues and communication. I'm also spent most of my first 16 years of my life completely silent. I've got a lot of catching up and talking to do.
Goodness me.
So for me, it's always a really hard balance. So I have gotten to the point where I as part of setting everything up, I will ask the parents, how would you like me to refer to you when I'm talking to your child? And I would do that in return. How would the child like me to refer to their parents when talking to them? And how would they like me to refer to them when I'm talking to their parents? All the way around, right? And same for, I make sure that I talk about how I like to be referred to and stuff. And it's part of that kind of really normal conversation.
Yeah. And Jan's just responding in the chat as well and saying that in China it's very common to use the child's name, so Jan's mum.
Yeah.
And for me, I can tell you that, you know, in easy conversations, I'm not really fussed. But the more important and loaded the conversation is, the more I need you to remember that I'm a whole person. The parent is a whole person.
And that's part of why I use young person to refer to the young person, is because that they're more than just that specific role. And I think that has to be part of all of the
Jenna, how much chat is too much chat?
So I don't know, and it varies, right? If you're and like, especially with the level of need that I work with a lot of young people who have neurodiversities as well, who have trauma and all sorts of needs, and that can vary hugely day to day, hour to hour. So I put into place really, really explicit communication tools.
Yes.
Have things on the table.
Yes.
For example, with one student, and it's different for every single student. This young person has a little octopus, you know, the inside out sad face, happy face one.
No, but I want one.
They're brilliant, really, really cool. She'll put it on her head as well. And if I am going on about stuff, she will flip it to get me to shut up. We also have a communication system for how much they want to talk themselves, how verbal they're feeling, a bit like how you check in with me about how talkative I am.
They don't know that I do that.
Similar. And yeah, so we'll have on the table, for example, yellow, orange, red, blue, purple, like different cards and different systems for each person to start off with. How are you feeling right now? Can I interrogate you deeply? Can I make you think really, really hard and challenge yourself, kind of thing?
There's two things you're showing me there. One is visual cues.
Yes.
To clarify, because sometimes it is difficult to read the room for all of us. And secondly, consent.
Yeah.
You might not want to talk about how you are. One of my kids has just started working with a tutor for the first time, and they are not one to want to talk about themselves. And if the tutor insists, they're going to put them off. They just want to get the maths done.
Yeah. Two words really importantly come to mind, and it's something that I harp on about a lot, which is deliberate and intentional.
Nice. What's the difference?
So one is about choice consideration.
Nice.
And like actively going through and decision making, and it's thinking about that consideration, about the other person, about that kind of why you're doing something, having that kind of justification and like active choice making as well as considering. Like, does that make sense?
Yeah. Okay. Jan, I'm conscious that we haven't heard from you, and I would love to hear about this question of how much chat is too much chat. And my instinct is it's quite measured in your context.
Yeah, so if we put it in time, I would say more than 10 minutes in a 60-minute class, that would be already too much. more than 10 minutes. And if we say put it into content perspective, if you cannot finish what you're about to teach in this lesson because of too much chat, then it's too much chat.
Yeah, that's really interesting. If you didn't get where you needed to get to, then you know that you slow down too much. And do you get so you know with the students if they're getting too chatty, how to correct them?
Yeah, well, actually, most of my students, they are not very chatty about okay, what is going on in their life unless I ask them actively.
Initiate, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. What's going on for you this week? Anything you want to share? Yeah, they usually just share probably 3 or 4 sentences. They won't talk continuously, nonstop. So yeah, I think for me it's quite easy just to transit to the lesson's goal instead
That's
of
really
like
helpful.
lingering too much. Yeah.
I think, yeah, and it's really interesting and important if you think about what we've just said about the kinds of relationships we have in the context of our tutoring, how each of us has a different measure or sense of what too much would look like, and how responsive we have to be to the needs of the students. So our closing question is to focus on Dee's Surly student. And the question there is, what would you do? At what point do you sack the student? At what point do you try to warm them up? Do you turn up the charm? Do you ask, the pointed question of, is there something troubling you here? Why are you not engaging? What would you do? There's a lot of expertise in this room, and Dee, understand that I'm not picking on this scenario, I'm unpacking it as a case study. So Sue, what are your thoughts?
I have said to students, not very often, but I have said to students, I get the feeling that you don't want to be here. It feels to me that you don't think you're getting anything from this session. Am I right? Is there an issue? And sometimes they'll say, well, I've just got to because mum said I've got to. And the answer then is, well, I'll have a chat with mum as well, because I'm not interested in wasting your time or my time. I've got students on a waiting list. Sometimes it will be, I mean, I've had a couple where I've said it over the last sort of 15 years, and they've grumbled about doing it, and I wasn't given a choice. And okay, well, do you want to not do it? Because if you don't want to come, I'm not tutoring you. At which point, when they're confronted with the option of this being taken away from them, they will decide that actually they will. Recently, I had a student who turned up for the first session and was obviously massively unhappy about coming. And the parent was quite apologetic about it. And I just said, all I'm going to ask from you is 2 weeks. Okay, 2 weeks, come to 2 sessions. And if you hate it, there's not a problem, but let's give it 2 weeks of full cooperation and see where we go from there. This week, that same student actually asked at the end of the session, do you have anyone else coming? Can I stop on? And stayed for another half an hour. So I think I would actually say.
Isn't that so interesting? Because you gave them so much power, didn't you? In that approach, by asking the question, giving them the freedom to say what they needed to say, and then giving them a measurable, limited time where they would have a go, and if not, no harm done. Yeah, we leave with a clean slate that we've already agreed. I know with students that I've worked with that it gives them a real sort of sense of that they can get out of jail if they need to. They're not overly committed. Jan, I'd love to hear from you.
I actually have a question for Sue. So for your situation, it's like always 1-to-1, and then during the lesson or session, you ask the student, do you want to continue or what? Or it's after the session?
No, yes, it is always 1-to-1. No, I would ask during the session.
Okay.
Because partly because logistically my sessions are stacked quite closely. I give myself a 10-minute turnaround. But I don't see the point in struggling through a session. You know, I actually think that it's best to address it there and then. If I wait till the end of the session, they're just going to want to get out and say whatever it is the easiest option.
So Sue's doing it as in response to a behavior that you're seeing in the moment. But Jan, I could say that, you know, in a different context, certainly with online tutoring, there might be, and certainly with group tutoring, it
exactly. That's what I'm about to say.
Yeah.
I feel like it's definitely more tricky if you ask a student in a group class, what are you doing right now? You're not with me. So in that situation, I always would ask the student to stay after the class just for a one-to-one chat. To understand what is going on the student side, why this lesson he's not so focused. I would try to ask the reason behind it after everyone is gone, because I don't want to put a student under the spotlight during the class. That will be so embarrassing for that child.
It's not safe. It doesn't
exactly.
I think it's so helpful, and it makes me really feel like we have to have another conversation about this in a few months' time. That so you've spoken about making sure that the student's safe, but if you think about the language that Sue used, she started with I feel that you don't want to be here. Yeah. And that's a far less confrontational approach than you're not with me.
Yeah.
And learning to use language that doesn't put people on the spot becomes really, really powerful. Jenna, closing words from you. How would you help the student?
It depends. We have a very laid out, very specific process for exploring, supporting, understanding, and putting things into place for disengagement and disinterest to a larger level.
You've actually anticipated disengagement. You're expecting disengagement. That's your starting point.
Yeah. I often work with some of the children, like one of the students I have at the moment that I'm just finishing up with due to various issues, which are no fault of the child, but they're a young person that's been out of education for 10 years.
Hold on, I definitely want to hear about the student, but I can't do it right now because we have to close this meeting in 1 minute. My question to you then is, if you're working with a student who is truculent, who doesn't say thank you, who's always giving you a long face, would you just ignore it because that's what you expect?
No.
Go on.
So for me, I want to understand the young person. What is their individual communication like? What are they communicating or not communicating? And we work from there. Is that just resting bitch face, for example? Is it that there is something going on? Is it that they just need this space to just switch off and unmask?
Yes.
It really depends on.
Oh, beautiful. Okay, let's pause there and let's schedule another conversation about masking and unmasking. I think that's so helpful. You know what? I've got at least one child who's got resting bitch face. And when the headmaster called me, do you? The head teacher
was constantly telling me, what have I done to upset you?
Yes, it's just my face.
The Queen had resting bitch face.
Yes, she did, on every stamp. Dee, closing words, 10 seconds.
This has been a really, really helpful session. It has made me think again about some of the aspects of dealing with more challenging students. So I have got some reflection that I would like to do, but I just joyous to be with you guys, and so wonderful to be able to share, all of us share the way that our cups are filled every day. I
feel the same. And I feel that the safe conversation brings the best out in all of us. And I so enjoyed making that happen. If you are listening on LinkedIn or on our podcast, then get involved by joining at qualifiedtutor.org. We want you to join the conversation. Thanks so much, Dee. Thanks, Jenna. Thanks, Sue. You guys are the best. Bye. Have a